My name's Charlie O'Halloran. I'm the founder of Holistic Gut Health. We take a holistic approach to helping people address their gut health issues, and you're listening to the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast.
Welcome to the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Danny Kennedy, and I'm here to help you become the very best version of yourself.
Charlie, welcome to the show, brother. Absolute pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Danny.
Mate, we'll dive straight in. How did you initially get into, having an interest around gut health and that whole holistic approach? Was this due to your own experiences, or what really sparked your interest in the area?
Yeah, it was definitely due to my own journey through that process. So I was a personal trainer just like you back in Melbourne. This was around 2019, I think, up until then for about 7 years. And then basically I started having some big health challenges. So just to take you back a little bit, so I was when I was about 18, that's kind of when my health journey sort of started. I'd been going to the gym for a couple of years, but then essentially I was doing some pre-workouts and things like that. You probably remember Jack 3D and things like that. Yeah, so
can't forget it.
it was good stuff, but the come downs weren't so great. It's going through year 12 and struggling mentally. So I went to see the doctor, and he said that, he pretty much just diagnosed me with depression right there and then. And I was pretty unaware. So I was like, well, yeah, that makes sense. He prescribed me an antidepressant medication, and I was taking that for about 3 years. And this is while I was studying in uni. I was studying exercise science, started working as a personal trainer, and then kind of just started to get a bit more awareness and decided I don't really want to be on a medication for the rest of my life. Everything's a bit grey when you're on antidepressants. So you don't really feel the lows, but you also don't really feel the highs. So I came off the antidepressant, and then that's when I really started to struggle a lot with my mental health, definitely. I started to experience a lot of anxiety. Moods were a lot worse. I started to not really know who I was anymore. And then basically what happened was I was actually I was with my partner Paige, and we were at the point we're about to break up, and I'd never told anyone about my struggles with mental health before that. The only person who knew was my mum, and so I think there was a bit of that stigma around mental health for me anyway, personally. So I had to tell Paige, and then that was the second person I told, and then I told I started to see a psychologist as well, because when I went to the doctor to tell him how I was feeling, because when I was coming off the antidepressants, I had the anxiety, but also had a lot of physical symptoms as well. So I had heart palpitations, I had insomnia, so I couldn't sleep, I had no energy. Obviously I had a lot of gut health issues as well, but I wasn't really aware of that wasn't normal, bloating and gas and not able to eat food. So I was counting my calories and training hard and stuff like that, but I just felt like shit essentially.
Did you so the anxiety came before the antidepressants?
Nah, so I never actually had anxiety before I went on the antidepressants. And then when I came off the antidepressants is when I started to experience a lot of anxiety.
Right.
So I went to the doctor, and he looked at my blood work, and he told me that everything was normal. And I was like, well, it made me feel like a hypochondriac, because I was like, well, I don't feel normal, something's going on. So then I took my bloods to another guy who I knew who was in Melbourne as well. His name was Dave O'Brien out of Fifth Element Wellness.
Yep.
And he looked at my bloods from the first time I'd ever had them looked at from a functional perspective. And he told me that, all these things coming up in my blood work were linking back to my gut health. And I'd never heard of some of these terms before, like leaky gut, SIBO, things like that. So I started my own gut protocol. And this actually coincided when I was going online as a personal trainer. So I was still helping people with their fitness, like fat loss, body composition. But I was finding with those clients that some of them were getting good results, but some of them weren't. But also a lot of them had health problems, so that I couldn't really help them with. So they might have had
not just body composition issue.
Yeah, exactly. We were helping them lose weight, but then they might have had insulin resistance, or they might have had PCOS, endometriosis, fatty liver, things that I'd never even heard of.
Yeah.
So I was seeing the changes in my own health and how I felt. When I started to work on my gut health properly, because I thought I knew a lot about gut health at that point, but I really didn't. So I was doing a protocol, and it was changing everything for me. So my symptoms were going down. I was having regular bowel movements. I was sleeping again. I was feeling the anxiety was starting to shift, even just brain function. I was able to sit down and work and be whoa, I've just had this constant brain fog for all these years that I've never realized I had. So that's when I started to learn a little bit more about this like way to analyze blood work and find out a little bit more about gut health and essentially help my clients with their body composition and then with their gut health at the same time. And then they were starting to get really good results.
How long did that? So from when you first got told, I guess, that, okay, there's a few issues we need to start to fix up here, and you started implementing whatever protocol you were using for gut health at the time, what was that duration like in terms of starting to recognize a difference in how you were feeling and the things like the brain fog and reducing anxiety and stuff?
It was pretty quick. Like, to be honest, it was, probably, well, actually, it took me like 3 or 4 months to even start the protocol. Because when I got it, I was like, holy shit, like, I don't think I can do this. Like, there were so many changes I had to make, so many supplements that I had to take. It was quite, I guess, for someone who'd never been aware of it before, it was very overwhelming. Because I didn't really have much guidance either. So he'd given me the protocol, but then he had not really, I didn't really have much support. So I was doing a lot of research, starting to learn it. But yeah, I'd say about like 2 to 3 months after I actually started it, I was starting to really feel significant differences. It took a solid year probably to actually get me to like, I would say a good point. Mm-hmm. And then probably another year on top of that to get from, there to actually like, oh, I'm better than I ever was. Like this
optimal
is
level.
Yeah,
like
pretty much like a point that I didn't actually know was real, like that I didn't know was possible. So it was a bit of a journey, definitely, but the changes were pretty significant in a pretty short amount of time as well.
That's incredible. And so I'm sure there's heaps of people listening or watching at the moment that, have probably experienced or are experiencing some of the symptoms you mentioned before. So firstly, like, how do people even identify whether or not they have an issue, right? Because I hear my partner say all the time, I'm bloody bloated or this, that, and the other. People might have a bit of anxiety, poor sleep, poor eating habits, mental fog, all that type of stuff. And obviously there's a number of lifestyle factors that can have impact on those things. And so what are some signs to look for to, I guess, make the decision to go and get some bloods done and see what's going on?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people, their first point of call when they do start experiencing these things is they go to the doctor. And then I think we're going to get into this a little bit later, but the doctor will often tell them that they've got IBS, and then that is what it is, yeah. Which, I mean, sometimes it can be good to have that label, but then it doesn't really give them much insight as to what they can actually do about it.
And that's off the back of what, just bloating and...
Yeah, IBS is basically just an umbrella term for a collection of symptoms. So if you meet the criteria around these symptoms like bloating, irregular bowel movements, digestive pain or discomfort, then you will fit the criteria for IBS. And then what to from there? Like, it does depend a little bit. Like, if it's really severe, maybe you might get referred to a gastroenterologist. Or they might just recommend cutting out some of the foods. Sometimes I've even heard stories of people getting recommended to use like an antidepressant because there's the link between the gut and the brain. But I think a lot of the time it's just like it's an umbrella term to like a label, and then it's not really getting to the root cause of what that could be. And a lot of the time it's just going to be a Band-Aid. Yeah, cutting out these foods or taking a medication is not really fixing what's actually causing the symptoms. So, I mean, to answer your question as to like how can people really know, I think it's good to have awareness around what is actually normal around symptoms and not just accepting it as normal. Because, when I felt terrible and then I went to the doctor and he said everything was normal, I kind of had the choice to be like, okay, this is just my normal, I have to accept it, or to dig a bit further and look for other help from other places. And like, that was my personality at the time, but I think a lot of people can be like disempowered and just accept that is their normal. So yeah, I mean, to answer your question, like, yeah, bloating's a massive one that a lot of people experience. Like, if you're constantly getting bloated off, relatively healthy foods as well. And that's what I had. Yeah, I was eating like what I thought was a really good quality diet, whole foods, but still, terrible gut health. Just because my gut wasn't able to tolerate the foods that I was trying to eat. And then, you've got obviously the digestive symptoms are one thing. So like I said, the bowel movements, like whether it's constipation, diarrhea, whether you're getting pains, they are one of the indicators, but there is also a lot of other things that gut health can influence that is not necessarily digestive.
Okay.
So mental health is a massive one.
Yep.
Like I mentioned before, there's a strong connection between the gut and the brain. They're in constant communication. So, if you've been doing all the meditation, the psychology, whatever it might be, you don't really see an improvement in depression and anxiety. That's a really common thing that we see, even the brain fog.
Yep.
So and then you can have like hormonal issues as well. So whether it's like really bad PMS, like acne, things like that. Big connection between the gut and the skin. So, these constant skin issues that people experience. Again, a lot of the time, if you have a skin issue, you think, oh, there must be a problem with my skin. So you might go see a dermatologist or you might get treatments or creams. But a lot of the time, it's not getting to the root cause of like, if the gut is causing those issues, well, the creams aren't going to fix that. So,
kind of like having a sore knee and going to get your knee fixed, but it's all stemming from the hip or the ankle or whatever.
Yeah, 100%. It's treating the symptoms rather than the root cause. And that is a huge common theme within I suppose, the conventional medical system, which it has its place. I'm not trying to bash on it at all. It's just that sometimes it's not really going to help people get to that optimal health state and get to the root of it. I'm not saying, again, that the gut is the root cause of every single problem, but I think a lot of the time it's overlooked. People don't realize that their gut's affecting some of their other symptoms. So, I mean, if people haven't looked into their gut health, but they've tried these other things, whether it's medications, whether it's treating their symptoms specifically, then maybe that could be beneficial to look deeper into their gut.
I feel like it's a bit of a vicious cycle too, like what you mentioned before around the state that you were in before you understood all this. Then you go and get told, oh, it's just whatever, get on these antidepressants, or this is just how it is. We talk a lot on the show about mindset and all that type of stuff. And when people get in that victim mentality as well, it would have been much easier if you just keep playing the victim, because people get addicted to that feeling, right? And so it's like, oh, here's another reason for me to be miserable. I'm just going to keep reaffirming my own story of this is how life has to be. And it almost, they're almost happy about the fact they get told this, and it kind of supports their story of feeling shit all the time. When you mentioned before around the benefits, I guess, of changing all that. And let's say for someone who's early days of identifying their gut health issues, like what can they be doing from a physical perspective? Like, is that a thing in regards to like outside of supplementation, food and stuff like that? Like what were you focusing on in terms of your training throughout that process? Yeah,
that's a massive one. Because before I got into all this, like I was training 6 days a week, I would say. Probably hour and a half, 2 hours in the gym. I'd be doing like really high rep, like not high rep. I consider it high rep now, like 12 to 15 rep range, hypertrophy ranges, what I thought they were anyway. Not much rest, not much downtime. So it was just all, and then I'll probably be doing like, a CrossFit WOD, or I'd be doing like a long run in there. So just training all the time. And I think a big part of that was because I felt so shit. Like I thought training would help me feel better. But a massive shift for me when I started to do like work on my gut health is actually just stripping it back a lot and doing less. So that was the first time that I ever started to do yoga. That was actually in my protocol, was to do yoga a couple of times a week just to help with like the nervous system, getting into a more parasympathetic state, helping with my vagus nerve. And obviously doing less training. So I was training probably like 3 times a week.
Is that so outside of those benefits you just mentioned, is it also to reduce inflammation in the body, or?
Yeah, well, there's a few different things to take into consideration. So it's just the total volume on the body. Yeah. So when you have gut issues, you are going to have a harder time recovering a lot of the time, because some of these bacteria can release like inflammatory molecules that can make it harder. It can create like central nervous system fatigue. So you can make it harder to train, harder to recover as well. So there's that element of it. And then obviously a lot of people with gut issues, if they're listening, they would know that like a lot of time you can get really sore as well. You can have extreme DOMS. Man, my legs used to be sore for like a solid week, at least 7 days. And a big part of that is because obviously some of these bacteria can also produce like lactate and hydrogen ions. And then you have issues clearing it out, because when you train, you're going to release these metabolic byproducts too. So then the bacteria is producing it as well as the training. So it's just like a double whammy. So then, you can't tolerate it that well either. So a lot of the people that come to me as well, they're doing too much. And that's what got them to having the gut issues in the first place. Like I can speak for myself. Like I was burning the candle at both ends. Early mornings, late nights, partying on weekends, alcohol, like everything wrong in the diet, like training so much that eventually my body just, and I mean, there was other factors that went into it as well. Like when with gut issues, it can go back to day one. It can go back to like, can go back to before day one, you know, in regards to how you were born, was it
Right.
natural, was it cesarean? Obviously antibiotics
Yeah,
I've done.
that makes a difference.
Yeah, man, because essentially when you're born, if you're born naturally, then when you go through your mother's vaginal canal, you're going to inherit her microbiome. So you don't just have a microbiome of bacteria in your gut, but there's also other microbiomes like colonies of bacteria in other areas.
Yeah, right.
So one of those, well, you got like the skin, you got like in the mouth, and one of them is actually in the vaginal canal. So when the baby passes through there, it's inheriting your mother's microbiome. So if you're born via cesarean, you don't get that. So you get all these different little bits of bacteria from like the doctors and the nurses around. So even that can put you on the back foot basically from birth.
Yeah.
So, and then obviously antibiotics are a massive one. Again, they save lives and sometimes they're needed, but they create massive amounts of damage to the gut microbiome. And then if you don't get that back, like you don't build that back up, which a lot of people don't know how to do, then you're just always on the back foot. So a lot of the time it's just compounding over time. And then you get to maybe 20, maybe 30, and then you start having these issues. And people are like, oh, what caused it? But it was probably just an accumulation of all these different factors throughout just regular life.
And so once you lowered your training volume, you started seeing improvements with gut health and just physically and mentally how you're feeling. Does there come a point in time where you look to increase that volume again? Or were you then like, all right, why the fuck am I going to change anything if this has worked and I'm feeling good?
Yeah, well, it just depends on the client too. Like for me personally, yeah, like I was able to tolerate more and I wanted to, like I enjoyed that. I still don't do anywhere near as much as what I used to do. And I try and have more balance throughout the week as well.
Yeah.
So rather than just be smashing myself with weights every day, and you would know this too, like there's not going to be that much more benefit doing, 4 sessions compared to 7.
Yeah.
So like I'd do probably maybe only 3 to 4 sessions a week, and I'd probably do less volume because I'm also just wanting to maintain my gut health and I'm aware of it. But if someone came to me and they said, I really want to run a marathon or I really want to be a bodybuilder or whatever it might be, then, it's about obviously
of course.
allowing them to do that. So it depends on the person's goals. Probably wouldn't say that, it's the best for everyone to do that much training, but if someone really wanted to for a reason, then you can build it up. You can tolerate it better.
Nice. Coming back to the symptoms or starting to understand whether or not you do have gut health issues, what is that? What are the steps people should take? Is it going to get bloods? Is it like what type of blood test should people be getting if that's a thing? Is it stool test? Is it? Yeah. What does that look like for people that are listening now that want to get on top of, even if they don't have gut health issues, they just want to check in and see how things are going?
Yeah, well, there's definitely a few avenues to go about it. For me personally, like I have a big passion with blood analysis because I find that you can see a lot within the bloods that you might not be able to see from things like a stool test. And the bloods look at the whole body. So the benefits of doing like a blood test is you're going to see like you can see different things that can correlate with gut issues if you know what you're looking for. And especially when you talk to someone about their symptoms, then you can correlate with that with their blood work. So you can kind of understand that. So that's what I do a lot of the time. I'll start with that because it's a lot more affordable as well. So I see a big trend in like kind of the space that I'm in, like the functional health, the more natural medicine side of things with like over testing.
Yeah.
So they might do a stool test, they might do a blood test, they might do a breath test, they might do a hormone test, like a saliva test. And then that's going to cost like, $1,000-$2,000 in testing when if you know what to look for in the blood work, then a lot of the time you can pick this up without needing to spend that much money. So it is important to work with the right person, the right practitioner. I think that's a really important thing because a lot of the time doctors won't be able to give you that direction. They won't be able to help you from that perspective. But I also think it's really important to do the basics. Like a lot of the time, my clients, it's the same stuff, the same basics that you can do a lot of the time for free that will help you a lot. It's just about having awareness there. A lot of people just straight away jump into hundreds or thousands of dollars of testing. They might take 20 different supplements and then they're overtraining or they're just chronically stressed or they're still taking certain medications all the time. That's just going to be a huge red flag, or their diet's out of whack or they're partying every weekend. So starting with the basics is always super, super important.
Yep.
And then, working with, I suppose, a practitioner who can understand all the different kind of things that can come up and not just going to give you like a cookie cutter plan because there's could be one person's perfect supplement or perfect diet will be the complete opposite for another person, because there's different things you can have going on with your gut health. Like it's not just as simple as like you got good gut health, bad gut health. There's different kind of underlying dysfunctions that can cause problems.
Yeah. And so in saying that, I mean, this might be a dumb question now, but is there any general guidelines that people can be following to at least put themselves in a position for healthier gut health that applies to everyone? Or is that individual that it is really from person to person?
There's definitely some things that apply to everybody. So simple stuff. So a lot of the time what I talk about is taking like a top down approach. So this is where like you kind of start from the top and you work your way down. So an analogy that I heard that I really like was, if you think about it like a river, so if you have an issue at the bottom of the river, then it's only going to be the bottom of the river that gets affected. But if there's an issue at the kind of the top of the river, then everything else gets affected downstream from there. So if you think about the body, if you think about it top down, like a lot of it starts in the mind at the top of the river, I suppose. So like this is stuff that you would be really good with, like the mindset stuff. Like if it's someone's, got these limiting beliefs that they can't get better, or it's part of their identity, which I find a lot, people have these, they've had these gut health issues for years and it becomes part of their identity, and they're trying all these things, but underlying, they think they have this.
You're going to end up in the same result over and over again.
Exactly. Or they're going to self-sabotage. So there's a lot of mindset to it, but also stress is a massive thing as well. Stress has so many detrimental effects on the gut downstream. So, if you're chronically stressed, undersleeping, whatever it might be, you got a really high pressure job, relationships out of whack, things like that, then you can only make so much progress with your gut health downstream.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important. And a big one as well is also trauma as well. So unresolved trauma, like these emotions that kind of are stuck there as well, that can really throw out the digestive function as well. So like sometimes like for me personally, like I had to fix my gut to fix my brain. Yeah. Like I was like, my gut health was the thing that was causing my mental health issues, but it can go both ways as well. Like you can take all the supplements and you can, do all the tests and follow the strict diet. But if you still have this unresolved trauma and emotional stuff mentally going on, then you probably will only be able to go so far with that.
Okay.
So that's like the top of the river. And then you've got obviously coming down. Another one that I talk about a lot is eating practices, because so many people don't do this. And I think it's a simple, free one that you can do, which is just literally like sitting down in a relaxed state, being present with your food, chewing your food down to a paste, breaking it down properly. Because something that I think is really important to understand is like once you swallow your food, it's out of your control. Like it's just up to your gut to break that down. The only part of it you have control over is obviously kind of what you choose to eat first off, but then how you choose to go about eating it too. Yeah. So many people are like eating their food while they're driving or they're at their desk, just like not even concentrating on what they're eating, not chewing it, not breaking it down. And that's where you're obviously going to have that mechanical digestion, where you break it down with your teeth and you mix it in with saliva and stomach acid gets produced. So doing that properly, just simply taking a few deep breaths before you eat, chewing your food down to a paste, and being mindful with it. I think also a good one to do is to just practice a bit of gratitude before you eat each meal, because then you're getting yourself into like a more relaxed parasympathetic state. It's a good time to practice gratitude. You're always going to eat 3 meals a day, or 2 or 4 or whatever it is, 7 for some people. But they're like kind of mini meditations that I say to people. You can integrate this into your day. It's going to be obviously a good place to practice gratitude, but also a good way to improve your digestion at the same time. Yeah,
interesting. And so I guess that leads us to the next one is, are you able to give some recommendations on like certain foods or food groups that are positively going to affect our gut health, and maybe some that people should be avoiding? Yeah, for sure.
So it does depend a lot on the individual, yeah. So one thing that I really like is slow cooked meats, bone broth, things like that. They're going to be high in the amino acids that you need to repair the gut lining. So you're going to have like obviously collagen and some of these amino acids like glycine that help to kind of repair the gut lining.
Yep.
So a lot of people miss that because they put a lot of focus into like prebiotics and probiotics, because that's going to help with the gut bacteria. But there's also, there's structures and cells within the gut that also can become damaged. So like these nutrient dense foods like meats, and slow cooking it can actually help to break it down a little bit more and make it easier to digest.
Right.
But the flip side of that is if someone has And I'm not sure, obviously, how much you know about this and how much like some of the listeners know, but you can have like histamine intolerance. So that can be driven by, underlying gut issues. And then things like slow cooks and leftovers and fermented foods and vinegar, then like those things are high histamine and people might not be able to tolerate those very well.
Right.
So there's a good example of like one of my favorite foods, but some people might just not be able to tolerate that.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that food's bad. It just
Yeah.
means that like their gut health isn't in a place. They need to fix their gut essentially so that they can tolerate those foods
Consume it.
better. Yeah, so I'm a big fan of slow cooked meats, bone broth, if you can tolerate them. A lot of people do jump to fermented foods. That's a common one that people obviously incorporate into their diet. And they have been shown to improve the gut microbiome. So they're good to incorporate in. But
Before we get going,
yeah.
explain to the listeners what the gut microbiome is.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know this is just completely fucking just pause what you're saying.
Yeah,
but
no.
I think it's a big one because that even when I put on my Instagram yesterday or the day before, I asked people to put in some questions or things that they wanted to know around gut health, and that came up a lot. And I feel like within the health industry too, like gut health, microbiome, those buzzwords just get thrown around so much, and they get paired with certain things that, for the average person has no fucking idea whether like what it is or what it's impacting or whether or not their supplement or the food or whatever they're having is actually having any positive impact on it. But sorry, could you just quickly explain?
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes I jump ahead too far because I've been so deep in this for so long that I forget.
No, you're right.
But with the gut microbiome, basically this is just like the collection of bacteria that are within your gut, and like there's a lot of different like parts to your gut. Like so when people talk about gut health, a lot of the time they're referring to the microbiome, which is in the large intestine. Which, if we think about that river, that is like one of the last, like kind of near the end. Because if we start from the top, you got obviously the mouth. It starts in the mouth, then it comes down into the stomach, and then it's going to go into the small intestine, and that also combines in with bile, which is released by the liver. So the liver kind of plays into gut health as well. And then from the small intestine, it goes into the large intestine, and then obviously it's going to be this bowel movement at the end of the road, essentially, end of the river. So the gut microbiome, that's in the large intestine. That's meant to be, you're meant to have about 95% of your gut bacteria in the large intestine.
Okay.
So it's just a collection of bacteria, and everyone's is different. There's no two gut microbiomes that are the same. And obviously things like antibiotics, for example, will wipe out a lot of those good bacteria within the gut microbiome.
Right.
So yeah, it's just to put it in the simplest way, it's just a collection of bacteria or microbes. And when they become like a group, that's what you call a microbiome. And the gut is the main one where most of the bacteria are going to be. But like I said before, there's interconnection with all these other microbiomes within the body. And they're just, again, collections of bacteria in other areas.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Sweet. Thanks for sharing. Where did I cut you off at? Fermented foods.
Yeah, fermented foods. So fermented foods can definitely help to improve the microbiome a little bit as well. I forget what I was going with in regards to the downsides of it, but obviously fermented foods can be, high histamine as well. And if someone does have an overgrowth of good bacteria, which you can have, it's not as common, but you can have that, then they might actually respond badly to fermented foods.
Okay.
So again, it's not the be all and end all.
Yeah.
And it comes down to quality too. So like, it depends on like the actual amount of bacteria that's within there and whether it's live or not. So if you go and get like, I don't want to bash on certain brands, but if you go to a supermarket and you get like just a standard kombucha, which is considered like a gut health fermented food, it's like first off, it's fermented with like artificial sweeteners, which potentially may have a negative impact on the gut microbiome in the first place, but it might not actually have that much live bacteria in there.
Okay.
Whereas like if you made your own kombucha, which most people don't do, then it's going to be a different story. Same with something like a sauerkraut, for example, which if you're getting the refrigerated version, then the bacteria is alive. But if you're getting like a tinned sauerkraut just off the shelf, then there's no live bacteria in there. Right. So it's not having any benefit. So quality does matter a lot there.
Is the quality guidelines within that to be out on shelves and in stores and stuff, is that pretty relaxed, is it?
Yeah, I don't think there's much.
There's not much regulation?
No, I don't think there's much. And I don't think there's a really great way to tell.
Yeah, okay.
Like you can look at the specific strains and things like that they're putting in there, and you can look at the numbers, but like in the day, it is a little bit hard to know exactly. And then what I was going to say there as well is like that is just affecting the microbiome. So that's not really helping with some of these other structures that could be within the gut that also might need to be repaired as well. So maybe you do have low beneficial bacteria, but you also might have damage to like the cells within the gut lining that are dysfunctional. So you want to have the right nutrients to support that. So another one I'm actually a massive fan of that people don't love me for saying this, but sardines are actually really good for gut health because they contain like a good amount of calcium because you consume in the bones with sardines, like the little bones.
Yeah.
And calcium actually helps with like those cells, like there's like they're called tight junctions between the cells that kind of are supposed to hold the cells together, but they can become like basically permeable. So there's like gaps between them, and that's what you call leaky gut. And calcium can help with that. But sardines also have like omega-3s, a really good source of omega-3s. That's going to help with the inflammation within the gut as well. And that's also another huge factor for a lot of people is like when they have these underlying gut issues, then they have inflammation throughout the whole body. So there's a few there. We could probably keep going, but I'm trying to think of some that are like obviously good for everyone. You know what I mean? I'm also a massive fan of butter as well. Butter and ghee for gut health as well. They help with inflammation because they have like butyric acid or butyrate within them. So again, someone might have, maybe they have dairy intolerance.
Yeah.
Obviously butter and ghee is still pretty well tolerated, but you know, it's a pretty good one there. So yeah, there's some. And then in regards, you're probably asking, you also asked like what to avoid. Again, like I don't want to create like excess restriction around food for people or fear around specific foods. It's just the obvious stuff. Like with my clients, I'll start them with obviously just, you know, eating a whole food diet is really the best starting point. Like alcohol is one of the worst things you can consume for gut health. Again, I'm not making friends with some of the things that I say, but we can't beat around the bush that alcohol is obviously, like alcohol is antibacterial. Like you use alcohol wipes to kill bacteria. So what do you think it's going to do within the gut? It's going to obviously affect bacteria. It also does damage the gut lining as well. So it causes leaky gut. So it's probably one of those ones you want to watch out for. There's an argument around gluten and gliadin and things like that. It's not the devil for a lot of people, but if you do already have like some of that inflammation, you do already have like some of that damage there, you do have an immune response to it, then you might benefit from avoiding that. But it's actually more so like some of the, like it depends on the type of the gluten as well. Yeah. So a lot of people can go to Europe, for example, and they can eat the bread and the croissants and whatever over there, no worries, because of the type of wheat that's being used and the amount of gliadin that's within it, or like less gliadin. So gliadin is actually the problematic molecule within gluten. I know I'm getting a bit technical for some of the people here.
That's good.
But in like Australia and America, we have a different type of wheat that is higher in gliadin, and that's actually the one that causes the problem. And then we combine that with like the pesticides that we use, especially things like glyphosate is a big problem with grains. So if someone's going to be eating that, like maybe like a organic sourdough would be a better option, or, you know, a grain that's lower in gliadin. So something like spelt or Khorasan, just easy swaps that people can make. So
is there a difference that you've noticed in between someone who's plant-based and not plant-based in regards to the percentage of good gut health between those two kind of groups of people? I don't want to separate the two people, but
Yeah, I mean, probably again, not going to make a lot of friends with this, but I actually find more issues with people who are more on the plant-based side than like the either omnivore or carnivore side. Because they're getting in a lot of this variety of plants, which can be good for like the microbiome. But again, they're missing out on a lot of nutrients that they need as well. So like, you know, some of these nutrients you can only be found within animal products. Like vitamin B12, like iron, like zinc. Zinc's a massive one. Obviously just protein, collagen. You can't get these really within plant-based diet. You can't really get omega-3s, which we're talking about with the sardines. So, and then the other thing is like, it depends on what they're eating. So if you're eating a plant-based diet, but it's like you're not eating, or like you're eating a huge amount of like non-organic plants and grains and things like that, then you're going to be getting a lot more pesticides than someone who wouldn't be, first off. And then obviously there's a big push now towards like, you know, some of these plant-based alternatives to things like meat and eggs. And
can't be fuck good.
Nah, look at the ingredients list on them, man. Like
you know, the thing that I don't understand with this is that like, okay, so if you go plant-based because you it's like a cruelty towards an animal,
Yeah.
and then you go and replicate the animal that you didn't want to kill. Anyway, it's fucking weird, but
Yeah.
I find that odd.
Yeah, 100%.
So you don't want to eat a burger because it's a cow, and then you go and make a fake cow and eat that one instead. But anyway, yeah.
And not only that, like if we really go into it, like a lot of these products are made through monocropping, which is going to be like the destruction of like natural environments to create like singular crops of whether it's wheat or soy. And then you're wiping out a lot of little animals in the process of doing that. So it's kind of like the argument around like why is one cow's life more important than millions of small animals that lived in that original environment. So that's a bit of a rabbit hole to go down. We'll stick with the gut health because but in saying that, personally, like I do actually find that especially when I'm looking at blood work and you can see a lot of nutrient deficiencies in blood work, like plant-based diets can lead to a lot of problems long term. But I also think on the flip side of that, long-term restrictive diets, so like long-term carnivore diet, even like long-term low FODMAP diet, which is usually recommended to people if they have IBS, because it's going to be a lot of those trigger foods. They end up having like low beneficial bacteria as well. Okay. So because they're not getting those prebiotics in to feed the bacteria.
From your own experience, like you mentioned right at the start, how when you received your kind of plan or the steps that you needed to take to improve your gut health, it was quite overwhelming and almost like a where the fuck do I start type thing. Do you have any advice for someone who has received the steps that they need to take and is finding it difficult to just wrap their head around how much of a change it's going to be in comparison to what their lifestyle or their eating habits have looked like prior to that?
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, this is a big thing that a lot of like my clients also struggle with as well. Because a lot of the time I say like you can have the perfect plan and know exactly what to do, but if you don't have the right guidance or the right mindset to implement it, then it's not going to do you much good. So, you know, someone like you, I know that you have a big focus on that. And like I've actually sent some of your podcasts to some of my clients because I'm like, you got to listen to this, like, because there is such a huge mindset element to it. And it's changing, you know, like you just got to kind of reflect a little bit, like the way that you were living previously is what got you here in the first place. Like if you were living a little bit more in alignment with what is actually going to be good for just general health a lot of the time, obviously gut health is a part of that, then you probably wouldn't end up with these issues in the first place. So that's the thing. Like we have to strip back the layers sometimes. Like you got these gut health issues and a lot of the time, so if we think about it, like you might have these digestive issues or you might have these skin issues and then they're the symptoms. So then you think, oh, what's the root cause of that? Well, that's usually it's your gut health. Yeah. Like there's some issues underlying going on with your gut, but then what was the root cause of that as well? Yeah. So like I said, there's like that lifestyle, the stress, the things like that, the way you were living, you got to change that too. Otherwise you might get better, but then in a few years, you're probably going to end up in the same place. You can't keep living the same way that you're living. So starting with the basics, super important, like nail the most important stuff first. So that's where, you know, a lot of the time people want to jump to the next new supplement or the next new trend or go more restrictive with their diet, but they don't want to do the basic stuff, the things that are really hard to change. So sometimes it is going to be necessary to work with a mindset coach or to work with a psychologist or whatever it might be to actually have that support. And something that we're really big on in our program is just obviously having community as well. So it can feel really isolating. You think like you're the only person who has these issues, and you know, because a lot of the time my clients come to me like, oh, all my friends eat whatever they want. They're like, what the hell are you doing? Like, why can't you eat this? Why can't you do that? And they feel like, you know, there's something wrong with them. They're very isolated. So being connected with other people who are going through a similar journey, that can be really helpful and empowering as well.
Be difficult, I would imagine, in like for people who are quite social too, those early stages.
Yeah, for sure. And it's important to still have that social aspect because it's healthy to be social. Yeah. It's just about being able to set boundaries and be able to like make informed decisions so that when you are social, you're not throwing your health out the window.
Yeah.
And a huge one that I've heard you speak about as well is like expanding your time horizons. A lot of people look for like, they want a 7-day juice cleanse or they want a 4-week detox or they just want, you know, the quickest, fastest thing. But it's probably been, like I said, it could have been since day one. You could be 30 years old, so your gut health issues could have been manifesting for 30 years. So to expect that that's just going to be resolved within even 12 weeks is probably, you know, you're not giving yourself enough time. And then you get to that 12-week mark and you're like, fuck, well, I still feel like this, but like I said before, for me, it was at least a year. It was probably 2 years. I still work on it every day. So like it's a long-term thing. And I definitely wasn't the worst, but I definitely wasn't like, I didn't have the best, you know what I mean? I was somewhere probably in the middle. So yeah, you've just got to kind of be prepared to put in the amount of time that it actually needs. Yeah.
Yeah. Can we quickly touch on juice cleansers? What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on like, is there any benefit? If so, what are they to doing a 7-day juice cleanse?
I mean, the biggest benefit that I would say that's probably someone might get is they're going to get a relief in their symptoms, because they're going to be, all their food's going to be already broken down. Like, they're not going to be much like fiber for them to break down. There's not going to be any like, you know, meat and protein for them. So they might feel a bit better because they're taking off a lot of that work that their digestive system that's already struggling was needing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, though, like, I don't think that it's definitely not going to be a long-term solution. It's definitely not going to be fixing anything. It's definitely not going to be sustainable. So, you know, you've got to kind of ask the question, like, why do you feel like you need that? Yeah, why would you even be drawn to that in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
It's because, you know, what you're currently doing is not working and you're looking for that quick fix. So I think, without bashing on juice cleansers, it's not one thing that it's not something that I would ever do personally myself, or that I'd ever really recommend to a client.
Yeah.
I mean, if it helps someone short term and they're not in like, they might have different goals, they might have different values or beliefs, then sure, go for it. But it's not, I wouldn't say it's going to be the best thing for most people, realistically.
Brilliant. Have you seen any benefit to, outside of the changes we've spoken about today, have you seen any benefit to gut health, or is there any research on benefits to gut health from things like ice baths or saunas or any of those type of, I guess you classify them as biohacking type physical exercises that people can do?
That's a great question. So with ice baths and cold exposure, I do actually recommend them to clients quite a bit. So the big one for that is actually the resilience side of it, just helping to build that, you know, mental toughness. So cold showers can be good there. Ice baths are going to probably be a bit better, and probably a bit better supported in research as well from like more of the physical standpoint. So just reducing inflammation, as well as also increasing like immune function and like certain white blood cells like neutrophils. And a lot of people with gut health issues have like a depleted immune system because it's putting that constant burden on the immune system. So ice baths can actually help a little bit there. Saunas can also kind of work synergistically to an extent as well, because they're helping with like detoxification. So a big part of obviously gut health is detoxing some of these essentially endotoxins. So it's like toxins produced by the bacteria.
Yeah, okay.
Because a lot of people have overgrowth of these bad bacteria. That's one of the kind of the root causes that people can have. And this like especially infrareds can help a lot with that as well. And just, obviously there's so many benefits to saunas as well, just from a general health perspective. I'm a huge fan of them. It's not something that I put into all of my clients' gut health protocols, because I think that things that are going to probably be a lot more beneficial, that I'll be focusing my time on a little bit more from a biohack perspective, which might not be fancy, but obviously sleep is a massive one, and especially sleep regularity. So having like a consistent sleep-wake time. So going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, because that's helping with the circadian rhythm. And the circadian rhythm actually has kind of like a governing effect on the microbiome. So a lot of people might notice that their digestive symptoms worsen a lot when they fly, when they travel between time zones. And that's because of obviously the disruption of the circadian rhythm when they're kind of moving through these time zones. So sleep regularity, meditation. Again, so many people just need to be in a more of a parasympathetic state. So more of a relaxed, rest and digest side of their nervous system, which they're not. They're chronically not. And that's probably the most common thing that I see with clients with their gut health, is that they're just so overstressed, so sympathetic dominant. High cortisol. And then they're stressing about their gut health more, and then it's making their gut health even worse. So meditation, breath work, relaxation, huge fan of yoga. Yoga's got benefits around the vagus nerve, and that's probably the other benefit of ice baths, circling back. Cold water exposure has been shown to kind of stimulate the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve is the nerve that kind of connects the gut and the brain, and that's like the highway of communication between the two. So if you can improve the tone of that nerve, then you can have better communication between the two, and that can improve the microbiome, reduce some of these digestive symptoms, and obviously in turn improve your mental health as well.
Yeah. Unreal. And then I guess lastly, what do you, in terms of supplementation, outside of, I guess, the specific supplements that you would be recommending to someone once you'd seen their bloods or whatever their results were in regards to their gut health, are there certain supplements that can be used as more of a preventative measure that people can use in daily?
Yeah, I'm always a little bit hesitant to suggest supplements because it does depend a lot on the individual. And I do believe that there probably are supplements out there that can be beneficial either way. But to have the clear-cut, I guess, insight knowledge as to what's going to be the best way of spending your money, then, I do recommend obviously some sort of testing a lot of the time. But to help people out, like one thing that I don't recommend is like just a general probiotic.
Okay.
Because that's going to be one of the things that people really jump to first and foremost. I do use probiotics with clients, but I don't just recommend them as like a long-term thing that you just take
like
to
a
support your gut health. Yeah, exactly the same thing. I don't really recommend that either. Obviously, whole food diet's going to cover that base from multivitamin. And then if you do have specific nutrient deficiencies, you can see that in the blood work. You can support that. But same with probiotics. Like there's so many different strains and like dosages. It's kind of similar to the probiotics in the fermented foods we were talking about before. That one probiotic could help someone, one could make their gut health worse. And at the end of the day, it's not going to get to the root cause. So you don't want to be spending $100 a month on a probiotic that you think is helping, but it's not fixing anything. And then that just makes it worse for people mentally because they always come to me and they're like, oh, I've done everything. I've tried everything and I'm not getting better. And it's because they think they've been doing the right thing, but they just haven't because they haven't had the right clarity. So I wouldn't really recommend that for people to just go out and buy because there's a huge difference in the quality. Magnesium is one that I pretty much recommend to every client. Magnesium is such a staple for it's got 600 to 800 processes within the body. Most people are deficient. It's very hard to get enough from your diet. There's different types as well. So magnesium citrate is actually probably one of the cheaper, better value kind of types of magnesium that's pretty well absorbed. And that can actually help to pull a bit of water into the bowels as well. So that can help people if they're more constipated. Whereas something like magnesium glycinate, that might be a bit better for helping around sleep because of the glycine. And then magnesium taurate is another type bound to taurine. And that's actually really good for helping with GABA and anxiety, really well tolerated digestively if people can't tolerate magnesium very well. And especially good for people on a plant-based diet because you can't get taurine from a plant-based diet either. So you're getting a little bit in that magnesium.
Yeah, beautiful. Unreal. Well, you mentioned before, I think talking about how someone using, let's say, probiotic, month after month, spending this money on this thing that's not working, and it's also not getting to the root cause of the issues they've got. Obviously, that's where it'd be highly beneficial to invest in. I talk about it on my show, whether it's your physique in terms of seeing a trainer, if you need fucking something fixed in your house, you go and pay someone to do it. It's like investing money, time and energy into someone that is going to be able to accelerate you in whatever area you need to improve in. And so obviously with gut health, that same goes there. So for someone to come and work with someone like yourself, what are the deliverables or the services that you're kind of working with on your clients? And I guess how can people reach out if that's something that they're wanting to pursue?
Yeah. So essentially what we normally do is we will start with looking at someone's blood work just to give them that clarity to find out what is going on, and then we'll lay out a protocol for them. And it is going to depend on what we find in the blood work and what their goals are too, because different people have different goals. A lot of the people we work with do have quite long-standing gut health issues, but then on the flip side of that, there are people who just want to kind of optimize their health, and the gut health has kind of been one thing that's been overlooked. So we break the protocol down into different elements because I find that a lot of practitioners will just recommend supplements. That's it. You'll have the consultation, then here's your supplements, and then come back and see me in a month, and then we'll have a look at what you're doing. Whereas we try and lay it out as phases so that it's kind of broken down. All right, first we're going to focus on this because it's that top-down approach that I was talking about. But inside the protocols, we also have eating practices. We also have stress management and lifestyle recommendations, nutritional recommendations, even training recommendations, so that all those bases are covered because, at the end of the day, you can take supplements, they can help, but if you don't address these other things, then you're only going to go so far. And then, like I said, the support along the way is a big thing as well, because the tough thing with gut health is, unlike for example, fat loss is usually linear, like most of the time anyway. Like it's kind of there's ups and downs daily, but like if you look at a graph over like a 6-month period, it's usually trending down or up depending on which way you want to go if you're doing things right. But with gut health, it's not as linear. Sometimes there are like ups and downs along the way, and it can be tough to get through those times. And that's where like it's so important to get through those times, because like I said, that time horizon, it can take a bit of time. So if you're giving up, if things get a little bit hard, then I mean, there's mindset to that as well, but like having some guidance there helps a lot. So we have, support systems in place with the community and things like that. But yeah, I mean, if people want to just check, I try and put as much free content as I can out on Instagram because
you got a great page.
Yeah, I really just want to kind of put the information out there because I feel like there's not like, I mean, the space, man, it's pretty messy. Like when I kind of look on, especially I'm not on TikTok, but if I do go on TikTok to see what's going on there, I'm like, whoa, like it's all over the place.
Yeah.
And I know that some of the things that I've probably recommended or mentioned may not be in alignment with what other people might recommend. And there are different ways to skin a cat, but at the end of the day, it does come down to the individual, and at least having some clarity as to like, this is what's going on in your blood work, or this is what's going on with your stool test, to know what to do. And like, this is what's going on. This is the root cause. This is how long it might take. I think that can just make the journey so much easier and better.
Yeah, 100%. Well, man, it's been a pleasure to have you on. I feel like the audience would have taken a lot of value from it. And, if you guys are watching or listening at the moment and you do have more questions, or there's other, things that you want to ask or just want to learn more about, as you said, we'll have the links to all your socials in the show notes. Otherwise, feel free to reach out. I'm sure they can get in touch with you somewhere on socials or email. But yeah, appreciate you coming on, man. Appreciate your time. It's been good. I'm sure we will get plenty of questions after this, so we might have to do a follow-up episode in a couple of months and have a chat about those. But appreciate your time, man.
Appreciate having me. Been a pleasure.
And thanks so much to you guys who have tuned into this episode. If you have taken some value and you have enjoyed today's show, we would love for you to take a screenshot of this episode, share it on your Instagram story, or to send the link to a friend or someone that you think would benefit from listening to the show. And make sure you subscribe if you have not already. We really appreciate you tuning in, and looking forward to chatting to you guys again in next week's episode.